This episode deals with a crime committed against a child. Please exercise self-care when choosing to listen.
The day was August 26, 1986. It was a Tuesday, and at 5 p.m, 11-year-old Michelle Jolene Lakey went to visit her sick mother at Mercy Hospital, situated on Jefferson Avenue, Scranton, Pennsylvania. The hospital is now called Commonwealth Health Regional Hospital. The 35-year-old had been admitted due to an intestinal virus and was very pleased to see her daughter. Michelle, sometimes spelt with one L in reports, went by her middle name, Jolene, but immediate family members referred to her by the nickname Boo. I will refer to her as Jolene. Jolene gave her mother a teddy bear as a get-well gift. It had cost $8, which came out of the $10 Jolene had recently earned babysitting. Shortly before 6 p.m, Jolene left the hospital, telling her mother she was going home to pick up a pair of pajamas, as she was planning on staying the night at a friend's house on Myrtle Street. Jolene and her family, consisting of mum, stepdad, and 7 siblings and half-siblings, lived in a house on 1300 block Rio North Washington Avenue. This was only a 20-minute walk from the hospital, and just before leaving, Jolene told her mother she would come back later that evening to say goodnight. Jolene did not return, and sometime over the next couple of hours she vanished, never to be seen by her family again.
Persons Unknown is a true crime podcast dedicated to unsolved murders and missing persons cases from all over the world. I'm John. I live in Wales, UK, and I research, write and produce this podcast. New episodes are released every other Monday. If you'd like to become a supporter of the podcast, please see the link in the show notes. For as little as the price of a cup of coffee a month, you can help to ensure these historical and lesser-known cases from around the world are read and gain exposure. The show notes are also where to find social media details, information about the sources used for each case, and transcripts for all the episodes. If you enjoy the podcast, please consider leaving a review on your app. They make a real difference, and I love reading them. Finally, you can help others hear about Persons Unknown by sharing and recommending on social media. Thank you so much for listening. Now back to this week's episode.
At 8:30 p.m, the mother of the friend Jolene was supposed to be staying with called the hospital to speak with Lois. She inquired where Jolene was, as she had not turned up. No one knew where the little girl was. There was extra reason for concern, as Jolene suffered from a chronic bronchial condition. She was born with pneumonia and was always at risk of it returning. In a newspaper interview, Lois described her daughter as a sickly and thin child. 3 detectives from the Scranton City Police, including Jean Carroll and Teddy Mouse, took on the case, but it wasn't long before the state police, led by Trooper Walter Pete Carlson, became involved. The FBI were also asked to assist. A description of Jolene was distributed far and wide. Jolene was last seen wearing a white blouse, trimmed with purple, dark blue sweatpants and brown sandals with straps. She was petite for her age and wore children's size 14 clothes and size 8 shoes. She stood at 4'8", 142 centimetres, and weighed 80 pounds, 36 kilograms. Jolene had light brown, dark blonde hair and brown eyes. Her fingernails were long. Her birthday was October 21st, 1974, so Jolene was 2 months from turning 12 when she went missing. Some other things to note about Jolene are that she was quite shy and softly spoken. She was afraid of the dark and needed a light on to sleep. Jolene loved eating McDonald's fast food and had an interest in animals, and when she grew up, she hoped to become a veterinarian. Police inquiries in the local area soon found several witnesses who had seen Jolene walking along Washington Avenue shortly after 6 p.m. She had walked back from Mercy Hospital with a friend, the one she was due to stay with that night, but the pair had parted on Myrtle Street. Multiple people reported seeing a girl matching Jolene's description getting into a vehicle near the AAA American Automobile Association building, which was just a block from her home. The Pennsylvania Power and Light Company facility was also situated close by. At first, police would not release details of the vehicle or even confirm whether it was a car or a van. In the years since, it has emerged that the vehicle was light yellow in colour. In the majority of reports on this case, it is stated that Jolene is believed to be the girl getting into the car, and that this happened on her way home from Mercy Hospital. In other words, she never made it to the house. An article in the Scranton Tribune on September 6, 1986, suggests the police had some question marks about this, as a purse Lois said her daughter had with her when she left the hospital was found at the family home. This is the only time the discrepancy is mentioned, so it may be that this was cleared up. A photograph of Jolene, used on missing person flyers and in the media, proved to be controversial, as it was discovered the image was almost 2 years old. A photograph from a strip of 4 taken at a photo booth in a local Scranton restaurant just 3 weeks before Jolene went missing was handed to the police by an unnamed informant. The informant believed it was a better reflection of what Jolene currently looked like, as she had matured since the previous picture. This development prompted criticism to be levelled at Lois and the family by police for providing an out-of-date photograph and potentially setting back the investigation. The family responded saying they had given the original photograph in good faith. Police argued that they were now back at square one, as they would need to recanvass the area with the new picture. The whole issue was blown up in the press, and the police even publicly said they now doubted an abduction had taken place at all. There was some back and forth in the press between the family and the police over this issue, but eventually things seemed to be resolved and the focus was again put back on finding Jolene. An early lead came in after a relative of one of Jolene's friends said they had seen a comb similar to one owned by Jolene in a van. I do not know who the van belonged to. Scranton police responded in just 3 minutes to this tip and impounded the van. However, in a subsequent search, no comb was found. In a separate development, a report came in from a witness who said they had seen a girl matching Jolene's description getting into a car in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, an hour southwest of Scranton. This turned out to be a false lead, as it was established the incident took place 3 days prior to Jolene going missing. Detectives Teddy Mouse and Jean Carroll were sure that Jolene had known whoever had picked her up in the vehicle on Washington Avenue. It was known that Jolene had stood up in school several times, warning her classmates on the dangers of going with strangers. The family even used a code word for arranging pickups and change of plans. The detectives were sure that Jolene would have fled if she had been approached by someone she didn't know and trust. Investigators checked out friends of the family, relatives and neighbours, as well as Jolene's sister's boyfriend. Nothing seemed amiss, and all alibis checked out. This is yet another case that was plagued by crank calls in the early stages of the investigation. One particularly spiteful person telephoned a family friend and pretended to be Jolene, saying, "They are hurting me, come and get me." A separate call was made to Jolene's aunt, claiming to be from the kidnapper. The aunt went to Naog Park in Scranton in an arranged meeting with the kidnapper. The aunt tipped off a local TV station about the meeting, but as far as I can see, this was another hoax. The investigative team became increasingly convinced Jolene had been abducted and taken out of state. A bulletin was dispersed to all parts of the United States, and in response, calls came in from all along the East Coast, as far as Virginia. Nonetheless, it was from New York City where the most promising lead was traced. On Friday, September 12th, New York police arrested a 32-year-old Brooklyn man on a fugitive from justice warrant relating to the alleged rape of a 14-year-old girl from Scranton. The man owned an 8-property apartment complex in Brooklyn and made a living as a landlord. I will refer to this man as Mr. X. It was first reported that Mr. X was a relative of Jolene, but this was false. He was not related. The rape that he was accused of had taken place at a campground in Covington Township, Pennsylvania, in early May 1986. The Times-Tribune Scranton reported that while law enforcement were not releasing much information about the suspect or his alleged crime, other sources were claiming that there was a connection between the rape of the 14-year-old girl and the missing Jolene Lakey. Apparently, a photograph of Jolene was shown to neighbours of Mr. X, and several said they had seen her recently in the area. What's more, the 14-year-old girl at the centre of the rape allegations knew Jolene Lakey. Another potential link was that the 14-year-old rape survivor had been picked up by Mr. X near the spot on North Washington Avenue where Jolene was last seen. Mr. X was not an American citizen, but a Romanian national who had fled the Ceausescu regime in the early 1980s. He had lived in various countries around Central Europe before travelling to the United States under a sponsorship scheme organised by the Catholic Church. A New York State detective was sent to question Mr. X about Jolene's disappearance while he was in county jail following the rape charge. Mr. X denied any involvement in Jolene's disappearance. His girlfriend told investigators that he was with her on August 26th when Jolene had gone missing. Nevertheless, his apartment and van were searched. A hair of indeterminate origin, they were not sure if it was human, was found inside the van and sent to Wyoming for testing. Nothing seems to have come from this. Fingerprints were also found inside the van, but Jolene's were not on record, so they could not compare them. Ironically, Detective Teddy Mouse had visited many of the grade schools in Scranton, fingerprinting children in case of abduction. Sadly and frustratingly, Jolene Lakey was not one of the children fingerprinted. Nothing incriminating was found to connect Mr. X to Jolene, and he was not charged in connection with her case. With regards to the rape charge against him, Mr. X ended up taking a plea deal and pled guilty to the lesser offence of corruption of the morals of a minor. He was sentenced to just 23 months. I'm not sure exactly why Mr. X was dropped as a suspect, but his lawyer told the court at his rape trial in spring 1987 that there wasn't a single member of law enforcement who now believed his client had anything to do with Jolene's disappearance. Yet another lead surfaced which took investigators out of state, this time to Mississippi. Again, the team were left frustrated when things didn't pan out. Jolene's biological father, Isaac Woody Lakey, had been estranged from his family for almost a decade. Reports vary concerning when he had last seen Jolene, but it was at least 2 or 3 years previously. Her father had been the one to give Jolene the nickname Boo. It was short for Boozer, because as a toddler, Jolene would walk around with beer cans that had been emptied and filled with lemonade. After getting divorced from Lewis, Isaac Lakey had moved to Texas. When Jolene went missing, investigators tried to track him down, as they explored the possibility that she may be with him. The problem was they could not find him. Isaac Lakey worked as a truck driver and moved around a lot. Investigators were able to find an ex-partner of his, but she wasn't able to give a new address. Police even put out an all-points bulletin for Isaac Lakey for unpaid child maintenance in order to try and find him. It wasn't until February 1987 that Jolene's father heard about his daughter's abduction after reading about it in a newspaper. He got in contact and it was soon evident that he had no knowledge of his daughter's whereabouts. It must be said that this is something Jolene's mother, Lois, had told investigators from the beginning. Time went on with no news of Jolene, and investigators were left scratching their heads. They also had an uncomfortable sense of déjà vu. Jolene's disappearance reminded them of another missing persons case that had left them flummoxed. On December 7, 1978, 22-year-old Joanne Williams of East Gibson Street, Scranton, vanished after leaving an exercise class in the Abingtons just outside Scranton. She was due to go out with her boyfriend later that night, but when he showed up at her house at 10 p.m, there was no sign of Joanne. Joanne's father found her red Datsun abandoned on Everett Avenue in North Scranton, near Cathedral Cemetery, a week later. Her glasses, contact lenses, handbag, cash, and an uncashed paycheck were found inside the car. At this point in time, there was nothing to connect Jolene Lakey and Joanne Williams, but a couple of years later, a sickening murder would introduce a frightening new angle to both cases. May 14, 1989, was a dark day for the city of Scranton. At 11:30 p.m, a woman named Dorothy discovered a fire burning on Smith Road, a private road in Roaring Brook Township, close to Lake Scranton. This is just off State Route 307. In the flames, Dorothy could see a pair of tennis shoes, and the body of 9-year-old Renee Jean Waddle was soon discovered. The little girl, who lived with her family on Madison Avenue, had last been seen in the early evening. Her stepfather reported her missing just an hour before the body was discovered. Renee's cause of death was a blow to the head, and she had been sexually assaulted. Presumably, the body had been burned in an attempt to destroy evidence. This shocking murder of a young child was eerily reminiscent of the 1987 murder of 19-year-old Lorraine Finn from Englishtown, New Jersey. On December 11, 1987, the University of Scranton sophomore spent the evening at O'Toole's Bar on Mulberry Street, then went to a party in a house on Quincy Avenue. At 3 a.m. she left the party, but she never made it back to her university accommodation. Just 2 hours later, Lorraine's body was found burning between two homes on the 400 block of Monroe Avenue. Coleman lighter fluid, kerosene, and paint thinner had been used to douse the body. An autopsy showed Lorraine had been beaten to death and had a broken clavicle and 6 broken ribs. She had also been sexually assaulted. The similarities with the murder of Renee Waddle were obvious, not least the fact that the mixture of flammable liquids used in both instances were very similar. This made police suspect the two crimes could be connected. 6 days later, 44-year-old father of 5, Frank Ossolani of Vine Street, Scranton, was taken into custody on an unrelated charge of child molestation. I will come back to discuss these charges later. Ossolani, who owned Frank's Auto and Truck Sales on Jefferson Avenue, was arrested following police inquiries in the area. An affidavit filed by Pennsylvania State Police showed that they were eyeing Ossolani as a suspect in Renee Waddle's murder. According to this legal document, an earring belonging to Renee had been found inside Ossolani's business premises. Initially, police publicly dismissed the link between the murder of Renee Waddle and the missing person cases of Jolene Lakey and Joanne Williams. But again, affidavits filed by the state police suggested investigators were looking into a potential connection between these cases and the aforementioned 1987 murder of 19-year-old student Lorraine Hill. Geography alone made them suspicious of Osolani, as he had owned an auto repair shop in Cresler Court, near Joanne Williams's home, and he lived just 4 blocks away from Lorraine Finn's university accommodation, Bradford House, at the time of her murder. Pennsylvania State Trooper Walter Pete Carlson questioned Osolani about the 3 additional cases, including Jolene's, in May 1989, shortly after his arrest for the unrelated molestation charges. He denied knowing Joanne Williams and Lorraine Finn, but admitted to knowing Jolene Lakey. Interviews with friends and relatives of Jolene also showed the young girl had known Osolani. Jolene had frequently visited his Walnut Street auto shop on her walk back from school. The location was just a matter of minutes from her home. She would go there to pet Osolani's German Shepherd, and she had been on car rides with him in the past. According to an article in Times Tribune Scranton from June 11, 2007, Osolani said to State Trooper Carlson, "You think I did this?" referring to the murder of Renee Waddell. Carlson responded that he did. Osolani then posed the question, "Why would I burn this one and the other one if I buried the first 2? While Osolani was in jail awaiting charges, a prison inmate came forward to say he had told him, "They have me on the 2 burnings, but on the others without bodies, they have nothing." The inmate had known Osolani in the past, so presumably Osolani thought he could trust the man. From then on, Renee Waddell's murder and the 3 unsolved cases were worked as a group by police. The Times Leader reported on June 4, 1989, that Osolani was also being looked at for the 1988 murder of Robert Lee Dickens. The 19-year-old was shot to death on Adams Avenue, Scranton. The only thing linking Osolani to the killing was that he looked a lot like the suspect sketch. I'll say here that I do not know what became of this angle. It does not seem to have been pursued by police. So who was Frank Osolani? Osolani was originally from Pittston, Pennsylvania, but had lived most of his life in Old Forge. His father was a miner who raised pigeons in his spare time, and his mother worked in a dress factory. He had 3 sisters and was the only son. He had been married 3 times, 1968, 1973, and to his most recent wife in 1983. Although at the time of his arrest for the molestation charges, she was in the process of divorcing him. On his arrest for the molestation charges and his possible connection to the brutal murder of Renee Waddell, his neighbours said they were shocked at the news, implying that he seemed a regular guy. However, a quick scan of Osolani's past showed he had a history of antisocial and criminal behaviour. This pattern started as a young man, when he got into trouble for driving offences and receiving stolen property. He also had a violent side. His first and second wives said he had been abusive, and his third wife cited violent behaviour when she filed for divorce. In 1983, as part of divorce proceedings, Osolani underwent a psychiatric evaluation. The conclusion was that he had self-serving, sadomasochistic tendencies. He was narcissistic and had what at the time was called mixed personality disorder. This term is no longer used in the DSM-5 diagnostic manual. The term other specified personality disorder is now used. This is when a person has traits of several personality disorders, but not enough to meet the diagnostic criteria for any. One mental health expert said Osolani was emotionally blind to the suffering of others and would likely end up in prison. Frank Osolani was charged with the kidnap, rape and murder of Renee Waddell. in July 1990, after much legal back and forth, the trial began. It was thought it may last up to 3 months, but in the end it finished in just 13 days. Abeles semen was found on Rene's body and was tested against Ossolani. DNA evidence was still in its infancy, and the results were inconclusive. Nevertheless, several pieces of circumstantial evidence left the jury in little doubt that Ossolani was responsible for the little girl's death. A witness had seen Rene near the fence of Ossolani's auto repair shop a little after 7 p.m. on the night she was murdered. The garage door was reportedly open at this time. Tyre tracks found near the location of the body were matched to a commercial vehicle that was at Ossolani's garage undergoing repairs. Several witnesses put the van on Route 307 near the location of the body that night. The type of accelerants used to burn the body were found in Ossolani's workspace. The nail in the coffin for Ossolani was that a purple earring belonging to Rene was found inside the auto repair shop. The earrings had been gifted to Rene just the day before by her stepfather, and she was seen wearing them on the day she was killed. On top of this, the autopsy report showed that Rene's right earlobe had been torn. During the trial, Ossolani's lawyers made it known they would be willing to make concessions if their client provided information concerning any unsolved cases. No such information was forthcoming. The jury of 8 men and 4 women deliberated for 12 hours and 40 minutes. They asked on several occasions for clarification on the distinction between first and second-degree murder. Crudely speaking, first-degree murder involves premeditation and deliberation. Second-degree murder requires intent, but not premeditation. In the end, the jury found Ossolani guilty of second- and third-degree murder, as well as rape, kidnapping, and voluntary and involuntary manslaughter. When the judge sentenced him to life, plus 30 or 40 years, Ossolani showed no emotion. Ossolani's wife was a key witness for the prosecution and helped to secure his conviction. In the years to come, she would complain of receiving threats and intimidation by unnamed individuals for her role at trial. She even claimed a note was given to her, threatening to blow up her car. I'm unsure if police were able to get to the bottom of this. As an aside, I do not know if Ossolani was successfully prosecuted for the separate child molestation charges he was first arrested for. The survivors were 2 sisters who said they were abused by Ossolani in 1982 and 1983, when they were 7 and 8, and living at his home. Ossolani's legal team tried to get the charges thrown out on the grounds that the statute of limitations had expired on the offences. At the time, it was only 2 years for such an offence. Prosecuting lawyers argued that the 2 years started from the time the survivor recognised they had been abused. Both girls had no idea at the time that they were abused what was being done to them. It was only years later, in 1988, that they realised they had been sexually abused. This shows the importance of empowering children by teaching them age-appropriate ways of recognising abuse and finding help. I really hope these girls were afforded justice. At the time of the trial for Rene Waddell's murder, state police said Ossolani was the only suspect in Jolene Lakey's disappearance. Not only had Jolene known Ossolani and visited his garage on numerous occasions, her last known location, near the Pennsylvania Power and Light Company facility on North Washington Avenue, was within eyesight of Ossolani's auto shop on Walnut Street. Radar-penetrating devices were used to search under the concrete floors of 2 of Ossolani's former business properties, one on Walnut Street, which by 1990 was being used as a warehouse, and the other on Kessler Court. This latter building had been demolished, but the concrete floor was still intact. At the former property, police teams examined a sealed hydraulic lift. Regardless of their efforts, the police found no remains at either property, nor anything that could connect Osolani to Jolene Lakey or Joanne Williams. In September 1990, District Attorney Michael Barassi sent state police to search 2 islands in the southern end of Lake Wallenpaupack in Palmyra Township. This is a 40-minute drive east of Scranton. Osolani docked his boat at a jetty on the lake at Ironwood Point and frequented the area regularly. The decision to search the lake came after a tip surfaced during the Renee Waddle murder trial. A witness said they saw Osolani on the lake with a young girl near the time Jolene had gone missing. The witness overheard the girl calling Osolani Uncle Frank. Jolene had apparently used this term to refer to Osolani in the past. The witness also saw Osolani throw something from the boat into the water. At the time, the witness thought it was an old motor engine, but in light of what was now known about Osolani, it was speculated this could have been a body. A dog named Baron, trained to find human remains, was brought in to search the islands. Baron did indicate some hot spots, but nothing of note was found. Over the next few weeks, divers searched the lake itself, but again, they came up empty-handed. Around this time, searches were carried out in Taylor in Scranton, with particular focus on an old strip mine off Oak Street. Cathedral Cemetery was also searched. I believe this was specifically in reference to Joanne Williams's case. If you remember, her red Datsun was found abandoned near this location. All these searches carried out by investigators produced no solid evidence connecting Osolani to the 3 unsolved cases, and no charges were ever brought against him in that respect. Even after being found guilty of Renee Waddle's murder, he never admitted to killing anyone and did not talk about any unsolved cases. While there is a lot of circumstantial evidence for Osolani's involvement in Jolene's disappearance, her mother Lois, also speaking in 2007, was sceptical. She needed more proof. In the 2000s, after years of silence, investigators attempted to reach out to Osolani, but he refused their attempts. Speaking in 2007, then Lackawanna County DA Andrew Jarbola said there was enough evidence to call Osolani a suspect in all 3 of the unsolved cases I've mentioned, including Jolene Lakey's, but not enough to arrest him, or anyone else for that matter. State Trooper Walter Pete Carlson, who had worked Jolene's case and some of the others, spoke of his frustration, being almost 100% sure of Osolani's involvement, but not having enough concrete evidence to get him into court. Likewise, Michael Barassi, who was Lackawanna County DA at the time of Renee Waddle's murder, said he also believed Osolani had something to do with the unsolved cases of Lorraine Finn, Joanne Williams, and Jolene Lakey. It is worth noting that in the case of Lorraine Finn's unsolved murder, there have been other suspects. In December 1988, semen found on her body was compared with 2 Scranton students. One of these men had been with Lorraine on the night she was killed, and the other had lied to police during the investigation. The tests came back inconclusive. Scranton City Police Detective William Walsh worked closely on Joanne Williams's missing person investigation. It was his hunch that had led to the searches of Cathedral Cemetery back in the 1980s. Walsh did not believe Osolani was responsible for Joanne's disappearance. Joanne did not know Osolani, and, despite rumours to the contrary, he had never worked on her car or any vehicles belonging to the Williams family. Many years ago, Joanne was declared legally dead, but her family have never had a funeral and are yet to have answers to the almost 50-year-old mystery. Frank Osolani spent much of his prison sentence inside his 8-by-12-foot cell and working in the kitchen. He died behind bars in 2020, taking any knowledge he did have about the unsolved cases of Joanne Williams Lorraine Finn, and Jolene Lakey to the grave. Over the decades, Jolene's family have continued to publicise her case and search for answers about what happened on August 26, 1986. In the wake of his daughter going missing, Jolene's father, Isaac Woody Lakey, moved back to Pennsylvania. Speaking in 1993, he was hopeful his daughter would one day return. He even questioned whether she may have run away. He undertook his own searches and followed leads to South Carolina, Oklahoma, Missouri, and as far away as California. I believe Jolene's father is now deceased. He passed away, never knowing what had happened to his daughter. For Jolene's mother Lois, the heartache never went away. For years she always kept the last 2 olives in a jar for her missing daughter. As a child, Jolene used to put them on her fingers and eat them off one at a time. On several occasions, Lois and Jolene's older sister, Justina, have retraced Jolene's last steps along the route from what was Mercy Hospital back to North Washington Avenue. Speaking to the Times-Tribune in August 2010, it was evident Lois still had hope and said it was even odds whether her missing daughter was alive or dead. Indeed, in the same article, a leader of a local missing persons charity expressed their belief that Jolene was still alive. Attempts to publicise Jolene's case by her family and the media often coordinate around the anniversary of the disappearance or National Missing Children's Day in May. In 2013, a kiosk was erected outside the courthouse in Scranton to remember Jolene and other missing children. 3 years later, new billboards with Jolene's picture and details about the case were plastered all over Lackawanna County. This was matched with a renewed commitment by state police to do everything they could to solve the case. At a ceremony to mark the 40th anniversary of Jolene going missing, a $5,000 reward was announced in the hope of finally producing resolution in the case. At the event, Jolene's sister, Justina, spoke movingly of the pain the family continued to experience without Jolene being in their life. One of the most recent developments in Jolene's case was in 2020. Following an article in the Scranton Times-Tribune highlighting Jolene Lakey's case, an anonymous letter was sent to journalist Joe Kohut. The letter was handwritten on lined paper in very neat cursive text by someone who called themselves, perhaps just a foolish old woman. It told of an incident that had happened to them back in the 1980s. The woman and her husband had been driving one night along Interstate 81, close to Scranton, when she heard a scream and saw a fire. The screams were terrifying and got very loud and sounded like someone was in pain. Her husband and other witnesses in the car chalked it down as teenagers messing about, but the woman had always feared she had heard someone being killed. The writer went on to say that the article about Jolene's case made her realise she could have reported what she had heard to the police, and that maybe it wasn't too late to do so. Obviously, in light of the way Arcelani had burned the body of Renee Waddell, this piece of information was very interesting to police, and at the time Arcelani was still alive. Scranton police made a public plea for the woman who wrote the letter to come forward, particularly as the area around Interstate 81 had changed a lot since the 1980s. They didn't know where to start looking. Police were at pains to say there would be no repercussions for the woman for not having come forward at the time. I do not know if she ever made herself known. Age progression pictures have been produced of Jolene, showing her as a woman in her 30s and 40s. If you have any information about missing person Michelle Jolene Lakey, you can contact Pennsylvania State Police on 570-963-3156 or Crime Stoppers on 1-800-222-TIPS 8477.